Welcome to the cabin to get started on this Christmas table runner for this year. So I thought what I'd do to start was just show you the fabrics that I ordered. So I ordered a whole load of fat quarters. So fat quarter means that it's a piece of fabric that is a quarter of a metre, or if it's from America, of a yard. But it's cut as a fat quarter, so it's half of the width and half of the length of a whole metre, which gives you a nice piece of fabric, which is about 22 by 18, something like that, in inches. One of the things if you get into patchwork and start working on it, because all of it's come from America over the years, most of the patterns and things are done in inches. So that's what I'm working with at the moment. So I ordered a pack which had 12 different fabrics in them, and I wanted them all in the greens and reds because that's my colour scheme for the loungers here. So there were things like the check, then there's quite a few with the deer on, and then some with poinsettias on. See that? Some different, and they're all in reds and greens, and then a few light tans, because one of the things you need, that's upside down. One of the things you need when you're doing patchwork is contrast. So from these materials, to actually make the runner, I needed 9 or 10 different fabrics. So I've chosen those, and what I'm aiming for is to produce a square. And this is one I have now completed. I'm going to show you how I've done this. All right, and you can see that that's got the contrast and the different shapes. So what I'm going to do is show you how to cut your squares, then how to create this patchwork square. I love patchwork because you can start with something very simple, and then by cutting it and turning it or just adjusting, it's like you can get all sorts of patterns. For a table runner, it's fairly straightforward. When you start to do the quilts, then you can really see patterns opening up. But we're going to get started on this, so let me show you first of all how to cut the squares. That's what we're going to start with. Okay, so the first thing I'm going to do is to cut this strip. So I have actually cut a strip off of this, so this is not the whole of that piece of fabric, but I've got it. I want my Christmas trees upright, so I've got it this way round, and I need to cut a 3.5 inch strip. I want my squares to be the final one. This square needs to be 8 inches square once it's sewn up. There will be 1/4 inch coming off of every side, so that's 1/2 inch. So at the moment that's 8.5 inches square, ready to be able to be used in the runner. You'll see how that works as we put it all together. To end up with 8.5 inches square, because there is a cut that's going to take place, I need 3.5 inches for each of the 9 squares that are going to make up my patch. And this is called a disappearing 9 patch. All the patchwork patterns have names, so this one is a disappearing 9 patch. So I want a 3.5 centimetre strip. So that is 3.5 centimetres from the outside edge to there. So I'm going to cut a strip at 3.5 centimetres. Rotary cutter, make sure you hold the ruler really tight. Move your hand up to keep it, otherwise it might slip with the blade against it. And take that piece off, I will keep that for later. And I now have a 3.5 inch. Now what I want to do is to cut that into 3.5 inch squares. So turn it around, and I find it's much easier to use my smaller ruler now because I have squares on it. This is a lovely marked up square ruler, if you can see that. Okay, so I'm going to put that, and I want to do 3.5 inches on this. So find the 3.5, match up the corner, that's not looking quite the right size, but hopefully it is. Looks a little short. That's fine. Right, and got 2 squares. The trick to patchwork is getting this bit really accurate, and I have to say I do struggle from time to time to get this really accurate, but if you don't, then things, as you may have seen, that square I've already shown you is a little bit off. In fact, I think these might be a bit off, but we'll see as we go. Making sure you're getting it all lined up. I should get one more out of here. Okay. So now I've got 3.5 inch squares cut. 3.5 inch squares cut there. So let me just show you then how I go about all planning out. So out of these fabrics, a lot of them have actually got a good picture on them. So there are some that I want to make sure stay in the top right hand corner, because if you look at this, you'll see that these bits and those two are at the corners as well, as you'll see in a minute. They don't change. So let me show you, let me just show you this one that I've laid out. This is with some of the other fabric, but let me just show you. Turn it around that way so it's up the right way for you. All right, can you see? So now I decide I want to keep these ones that have got like a picture in them in the corners, and then I can use the more pattern ones here, because what I'm going to do is cut it down the middle and across the middle, and then we turn. And so these bits remain, the corner squares remain as they are, and keep that picture. So in designing the squares, you need to think about what is there fabric you want to make sure you see the pattern or the picture in the fabric. Put those at the corners, and then the patterns that can be cut, like the checks and the Merry Christmas and that, put those in the middles, and the one right in the middle will get cut into 4. So you're going to lose whatever is on that. It will just be the colours from it that will make it. So having cut. Once I've cut all the squares, then I can arrange them, and I'll show you what I'm doing. Okay, so having cut my fabric, I now want 4. I want 4 of these, and they're the ones that I want to keep in the corner. So 1, 2, 3, 4 of those, and then to go in, and then I'm going to place four of those. They're going in the middle, and then I'm going to, because I want the other ones I've cut have got my reindeer on, so I want those in the corners. So that's going there, that's going there, that's going there, and that's going there, and then that one's going to go in the middle. So that's what that patchwork, that's your 9 squares. So that's one of the patterns. The others I have, let me just pick up another set. So contrasting with that, this one has the red reindeer. So this is a red block. So I've got green blocks and red blocks. Some are darker contrast, some are lighter. I've got 4 different arrangements, so let me just show you. So that puts the red and light ones in there, and then between those I've got the Christmas trees. But these are Christmas trees on the red check, and then the same centre for that one. That's the second arrangement. Let me get the third arrangement. Right, the third arrangement has the Merry Christmas in the middle instead. And this one, I've got the red Christmas trees in the corners so that I can see those. So Christmas tree, this is another red with the contrast of the green, but this time instead of the trees I've got the poinsettias. Okay, and that has the Christmas in the middle. And the fourth one, so I've got 4 different designs out of this, and that will have the reindeers and the trees. Ooh. So it really does depend what fabrics you want to show off in what you're doing. And this is quite a small pattern because I want it to be a table runner. I don't want it to take up the whole table. So this then has the checks that will pick up. Oh, right, there should be a check there. I've lost one. I'll find it in a minute. And that one also has the Merry Christmas, has that in the middle. All right, so you can see the different arrangements that you can make. So what you need to do is cut all your squares and then play around, decide which ones you want in the corner, which ones you want at the edge, and you'll gradually work that. You'll easily work that out. All right. Right, so let's get going with one of those squares then. Okay, so we're going to start with this one. As you see, I've now laid that out in the order that I want it. So what I now need to do is I need to sew that to that with a 1/4 inch seam, and then that to that with a 1/4 inch seam, and open that up. Do the same on this row, and then the same on that row. And then join those rows together. So I'm going to get started on that, and I'll bring it back over, pressing it between each go. So I'll show you how to do that. Okay, let's go over to the sewing machine and get sewing. Right, so 1/4 inch seam allowance. Most sewing machines come with a foot that has a 1/4 inch on it. If not, you can buy 1/4 inch foot. On mine, you probably can't see, but there's a little edge there that I can put it to. So just gonna put down and so open that out. And now I want to put the piece on this side as well. Match it up really carefully. And I'm just going to do the same with all 3 rows. So that's that one. Get these done, and then I'll show you how we put it all together. that's all 3 runs of that. I'm going to take those over and press them, and then I'll come back and join them to each other. Okay, so I'm now going to press these. Now, when you're pressing, you want to be able to make sure that when you put them together, the seams are facing away from each other. So when I put this together, I want those 2 to go that way and those 2 to go that way, because then when I join them together, can you see, you won't have to go over 2 lots. So you do that, you're going to have a lot of thick fabric. This way they nest in closely together and they press out nice and flat. So the top ones I'm going to press, this is the darker colour, and you always try to press to the middle, so that's what I'm going to do. So I'm going to start with this one, and I want to press it to the middle, and I want to press it to the middle. Then I can turn it over, making sure that's going the way I want it to go, and give it a good press and just pull it outside so it gets really flat. Okay, that's that piece. And with this one, I want them to go the other way, so I want it to go that way and that way. Pressing it out, turn it over, and then press it really neat. And then for the piece at the bottom, obviously I want to go the same way as I did at the top. So this time I want them to go into the middle, into there, into there, turn that over, keeping that nice, and then just pull out so you really get a good press, so you don't ruck on the seam. And now we have our 9 square. So I'm now going to go over to the sewing machine and sew these so that this bit, these 2 line up with those going opposite ways. Okay, so I'm just going to go to the sewing machine and do that, and then I'll come back and show you what I do for cutting it. Right, so that's now sewn, so I'm going to press that down on there. And you can see these are going, they've nested it in really nicely. So when you press it, you don't get a bump in these corners. Right, so that's my square, my 9 square, and you could just put those together and it would look really attractive, but I just wanted to show you something a little bit different, so we're going to do the disappearing 9 square. So to do that, I need to be cutting this, and before I cut it, I need to make sure it really is square. So I'm going to take my, if I can find it, I had it here, there it is. Okay, so this now should be, because we've lost ½ an inch all the way across, yeah, and we had them at 3 lots of 3.5, so that would have been 10.5. So if I'm right, this should be about, sorry, 9.5. This should be a 9-inch square, which it pretty much is. That's pretty close. So can you see that on the square? Measuring that up on the 9-inch square. So that's now become a 9-inch square, where I've lost the 1/4 inches from cutting. So 2 lots of ½ inch. So I am going to just, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to put my ruler on there, line up on the top edge, make sure my lines are going across on where the joins are. So I've got one line there and line, yeah. All right, and then just to be sure that this is really square so that it will fit well when I cut it in a minute, I'm going to cut just a little trim, just going to trim down that edge. Turn it again, want 9 again. up on that corner where I've already squared it. Sorry, let me get that right. It doesn't matter how careful you are, you will always find you're probably a little bit out, but this is why you square it up afterwards, so that you might find you're better at it than I am. I think part of my eyesight issues don't help really. I'm going the other way so I can see what I'm doing. That way. Sorry. 9 and 9. So that's 9. And there. 9 there. That's pretty square actually. And you'll do the same again when you finish off the final square. So there we have the 9 by 9. The next thing we're going to do is to cut it down the middle here and the middle here. To do that well, I am going to use the fact that this is now a 9-inch square. So 4.5 will be halfway. But what I do have, so that it doesn't all fall apart, is I have a rotating cutter. So let me just find a cutting board. Let's just find that. So this is my rotating cutting board. So I'm going to put it on there. I'm using the ruler to measure rather than the cutting board. I find it's more accurate. You can do both, but I just think I find it's more accurate. So I want 4.5. Let's just get some of this out of the way. So I want 4.5, and that should take me to 4.5. And cut down through the middle there. There's always a bit when you think, please let this be right so it works. But I'm sure you it will. And then 4.5. So now what we have are 4. So it's just missed. Just didn't quite catch that. So there we go. 4.5 inch squares, and then you can decide how you want to play around. So you can twist them around however you like. You can turn them halfway, and you could turn that one halfway. Don't turn that one. Turn that one halfway. Don't turn that one. All right, you see, and then you get that pattern. I'm choosing this time to turn those a full circle round so that I actually end up with that pattern. I think that looks really nice. I'm really happy with that. And what it means is that if people are sitting on one side of the table, those two are up the right way. If people are sitting the other side of the table, these two are up the right way. And now all I've got to do is go back over to the machine and do a 1/4 inch there, a 1/4 inch there, and then join these two together. So I'm going to go do that, and I'll bring it back and show you the completed square. So here is the two bits joined together. As you can see, you're joining it together so that you don't get lots of seams. The only place where you'll get two seams butting up against each other is down the middle here. And that's why you need to make sure you've pressed them both the opposite way as well. Same principle all the time. So on that, pull that out, press that one out, and there we have our next square. So if I find the one that we've done before, I'll have to put that down somewhere. Go. I'll find it in a bit. And then, so I'll do that one. So I'm going to get on and do the others, and then I'll show you how I join the different pieces together to make the table runner. But there's our as the beginning of our table runner. That is a disappearing 9 patch, and you can use that on all sorts of things, and obviously the way you join them together in quilts and things gives you all sorts of patterns, but it's something you can play with once you've learned to just cut that 9 square into the pieces to make 4 squares and then join it back together again. And that's the art of patchwork: cutting, rejoining. Okay, good. I'm going to get on with all those other squares, and I'll just show you how I join it together into a table runner. Good. So since I last showed you, I've now actually made a number of the squares. So just let you see the different patterns that we've got. So there's one with the Christmas trees, and then another one which has got and what I've done, as you can see now, is I've joined these together. So having made my squares, I then decided what sort of pattern I want. So for instance, I made this one, which I love, but I decided not to use it in the run of the table runner because I wanted to get a bit more of a contrast. And so I decided I was going to use 2 of the lighter ones. Can you see these 2? But that's okay, because I'm going to be using exactly the same pattern to make the placemats. So the table runner is now made up of these 5, and each of them is joined together. I cut 2.5-inch strips from the red fabric. I will put instructions down below with this video, so if you want to try it, you can do it. But 2.5-inch strips, 2.5 by 8.5, because the squares have ended up as 8.5. They are 8.5-inch squares. Which means ultimately there'll be an 8-inch square, which is what I wanted, because for the table mats I don't want them to be much more than 8 inches wide, or I'm going to run out of space across my table. So you do need to a bit, if you want to make something fit, then you might need to measure up. But obviously you can make these with whatever size squares you want. So, but this is to get an 8-inch square. So I've joined those together with those strips there. What I will now do is I will put a border. I will take this same red fabric that I've got a couple of meters of this. So I'm going to use that to put a border all the way around that table runner, so it'll be framed in that red. And then once I've done that, I'll show you what I do in terms of backing, quilting, and then binding it. So that'll be the next part of this whole series. So with what I'm going to do with these, and I'm going to make more of those, so I'm going to make 2 of each of the patterns, because I've got 4 different patterns that I've managed to make. I'm going to do 2 of each, and these will just have a strip either side, which will then make them the size I want for the placemats. And once again, those will then get backed and quilted. I'll show you how I do that. So that's how. So this is the basic pattern that we've created with our disappearing 9 patch. And what I'll do now is I'll get the border put on the table runner and cut the backings, and then I'll show you how I back and quilt. All right, but that's the beginning of it. That's the basis of the patchwork. Okay, good. Let's get on with this. I want to try and get this finished so I can have it on my table throughout with all the Christmas decorations, which we'll be putting out very shortly. Okay, see you when I get round to in the next bit bordering this. So I've now cut one long strip of the 2.5-inch wide of the red, and I'm now going to stitch that all the way down on one long side of the runner, and then I'll do the same on the other. So let's just get this in the machine, and I'm going to run right the way down this edge, just lining it up as I go. So I'll just carry on till I get to the end, and then I will put the same on the other side, and then 2 shorter strips either end, and then I'll show you what it looks like with the border on it. Okay, So before I get on to actually showing you how to back and quilt, I thought I'd just share with you a little bit about the wadding that we use, all right, which is what goes between the top and the bottom part. So you have a sandwich of a bottom piece of fabric, the wadding, and then your quilted pattern, which I'll show you when I do all that. But I thought before I do show you that, I just sort of talk about different wadding. So there's basically two different sorts of wadding. There is a cotton wadding, which usually has a little bit of polyester in it, and that is quite thin. It feels feels a bit felty. And that is what I would always use in bed quilts or anything like that. But usually when I'm making things like table runners and that are just decorative items, then I use a polyester. Oh, sorry, I've sat on it. I use a polyester wadding. So that's this one, which, as you can see, is probably more like you'd expect to see inside, I don't know, cushions, things like that. But it's a polyester. So it's like a sandwich, and it has polyester in the middle. And that actually is perfect for using, and cheaper. So it's perfect for using for table runners and things like that. So that's what I'm going to use for this table runner. But as I say, when I make quilts, then I would use the cotton. So I've got a big bundle here, as you can see, ready to do a quilt at some point. I haven't got onto a new quilt recently. But that's 80% cotton and 20% polyester, so that's fine. And that's a twin size roll. So if you were making a quilt for a twin bed, a single bed, you can buy it. It says twin because everything is in American words when it comes to quilting. But as I say, I'm going to use the poly down. And I usually use the Hobbs because I find that's really good quality. It holds up well, and it's very easy. As it says on the packet, it's very easy to quilt. The reason you quilt is to hold together the wadding and your patchwork and the backing. But then in doing the quilting, you can think about what sort of design you have. So I'm going to talk you through that in the next bit, but I thought I'd just share with you the different sorts of wadding that you can use, okay? Right. Next stage is to show you how I'm going to make my quilt sandwich and quilt the table runner. Oh, right, so we are going to get this table runner finished off, and the next thing we need to do is to make the sandwich. It's not lunchtime. This is to make the sandwich for the thing. So what I actually need is a backing piece of fabric. So this, I'm still using this same red, the little it's called reindeer feet because it's got the little scattering all over it. So I'm going to use that, which is the same as I used for the border. So that's going on the back. And then I need a piece of wadding, which I've cut to the same size. That needs to go on top. And then the patchwork that's going to be quilted will go on top of that. So I'm going to line all those up, and then I'll just show you how I actually fix them together, okay? So give me a couple of minutes to get that lined out, and then I'll be back to you. Right, so I've got the wadding on top of the backing material, and both of these are slightly bigger than the runner because when I quilt it, things can shift a little bit. So you want a bit of extra to play with, and then I trim it all up at the end. So let me just show. So this is what I use when I'm doing. You can pin, but I prefer to use adhesive. This lifts and moves. So if things start to go wrong, you can move it around a bit as well. So I'm just going to take the wadding off and spray about half of the fabric. Bring the wadding over and lay that down over the fabric. And then just do the same the other end. Getting towards the end of this can, I think it's going a bit wobbly. And then smooth that side down. And then what I do is I turn it over and smooth the fabric right out and line it up. So can you see, look, I can lift it up. I can lift it up quite easily here. So it doesn't stick solid, it just keeps it in place, which means you can also adjust it while you're sewing as well. So just want to get that fabric smooth right out to the edges so it's nice and flat on the back. Right, then we turn that over, and I'm going to lay out my top. Now, this is quite a tight fit from one side to the other because unfortunately the width of the fabric and what I had left, so I've decided I could have gone and got some new fabric, but I decided I'm going to make this work and I'll just trim up all the way around the edge afterwards. So I'm going to pull that one back, do the same this way now. Lay that one down, leaving this space at the edges to allow for the stretch when I quilt. Or the shift, not the stretch, it just sometimes moves around a bit. Going to need to pull can stretch the wadding a little to get it a bit longer. So as I say, it's a little bit short, so I'm going to be careful as I put it together. But I'm not too worried about that. One of the reasons I don't actually sew for other people is because I'm not that fussy. I want it to look good. I want to enjoy doing it. I don't want to get stressed out because this little bit doesn't work and that little bit doesn't work. So I tend to mostly make for myself or for family or friends who are quite happy about that. So there we go. That's now the sandwich. So our quilt sandwich is made. So now I'm going to need to go to the machine. And my next decision is how am I going to quilt it? All different things you can do for quilting. You can just go round the shapes. You can do lots of lines so it holds it really tight. You can do it diagonally and make a crisscross. I think with this, I'm going to just actually pick out across. I think I'm just going to go around the squares and across like that because otherwise I think it's going to be too much. I might pick out the other squares. I'll see once I get going. But we'll take this out to the machine and I'll show you how I put it through the machine. And we'll make some decisions on the actual quilting while we're doing that. Good. Nearly there. Once we've quilted it, then I've just got to trim it and bind the edges, and then my table run will be ready. And you can see this is on my table. I've had to come indoors because I don't have a big enough space out in the cabin to do this. So, excuse me, I've got a bit of a sniffy cold. Don't know where that's come from. But as you can see, that will be my table runner, and then the placemats will go around it. So, right, let's go and get this quilted. Right, so now I've got my table runner in the sewing machine. I'm going to start quilting from the middle. If you start from the middle and gradually work out, then any drift of the fabric will go sideways. If you start from one end and it drifts, you can get it bunching up. So always start from the middle when you're quilting. And I'm just using a straight stitch and I'm going to stitch it on the lines. Initially, I'm just going to stitch on these lines going this way. All right. When I'm working with it at the width of this, I do need to roll it up into the middle of the machine. I've got the other end off the end, and I'm going to do a slightly longer stitch. My normal stitching when I'm doing seams and things is a 2.5 stitch. I'm going to, that's millimeters, I think. I'm going to take it up to 3.5. In fact, I'm going to take it up to 4. So I get a slightly longer stitch, which will look more like hand stitching. So here we go. From one end to the other. I lost my pedal. There we go. I'm going to take it. And when I'm quilting, I tend to go slow. Now, I do have a particular quilting, what they call a walking foot. But on a small project like this, I don't really need it. Oh, sorry, I just knocked the camera. So let's just easy guiding it down. That's just taking the seam line. So the stitch is going into where that is, and that's called stitching in the ditch. As you can see, I've got it quite slow so I can guide it through the machine down that seam line, smoothing out the fabric, holding it out each side as I go down that line. And I'm using red threads so it actually will merge in with the fabric. I'm not looking to do decorative quilting here. I'm just looking to quilt the fabric to hold it in place because I think the pattern is enough. If you wanted the quilting to show up more, then you would use a contrast colour. And that will give us, there we go, and that has stitched it down there. Can you see that's held it? Now I'm going to move it across to the next side. So, and then I'm going to do the next line down, and I'm going to work one way and then I'll work back the other way. So you don't need to see me doing all this. I'll just get on and quilt that, and then I'll show you where I've got to when I've done that. Okay, so I've stitched it all. I'll see if I can show you. I might take some close-up pictures to show you later, but if I turn it onto the back, you can probably now see the stitching, all right? And I actually chose, once I got going, to not just stitch around the squares, but to not just stitch, sorry, around the squares, but to stitch across as well. So on the back, you can see how that's held. And then I went all the way around the inner border. So now that is all held in place by the stitching. And if you look at the stitching, I don't know if you'll be able to see it. I'll bring it up close to the camera in a minute. You probably can't because it's red on red, but it's long stitches, longer stitches. So that is now all stitched together. And what I now need to do is to trim it all up. Now, what you'll notice, if I show you this end here, you will see that it's gone slightly, it drifts slightly. Some of it's to do with the fabric stitching, some's where maybe I haven't got my corners absolutely square. So if I turn you down a minute, I'll show you how I'm going to trim this up. Right, so what I'm going to do, especially because I was a bit short on the end here, I'm actually going to trim this border down to 2 inches. It would normally have been 2 1/4 because I've just taken 1/4 of an inch off the 2 1/2, but I'm going to trim it down to 2. So I'm going to put the 2 inch mark down the inside of this border, and then, sorry, I need to get my, and then I'm just going to trim off, and you'll see that I've had to sort of square up that edge, and that often happens, and I'm not bothered about it. If you want it perfect, then don't watch me. Because I'm very much a home crafter that just likes to make things. So that's what I'm doing. So I've done that there. So now I'm going to do the same at the other end. And then I will do the same at along the sides as well. So 2 inches from that inner border. Trim it up, and I'm hoping that that's left me enough on the back. Yes, that's fine. Okay, right, so I'm going to do the 2 long edges, and then I'll show you what we do next once we've squared it all up, and that is put the binding on it to finish it all off. So that'll be the last bit, and we'll do that in a minute when I've trimmed this all up. Right, so what I've done now is cut 3 2.5 inch strips, which are the full length of the fabric. I measured the outside border of it, and 3 strips of this should go all the way around. But what I need to do, sorry, before I make them into a border, is to join the strips together. So I have one very long strip that will go all the way around my border. And the way you do that is you overlap the corners like this. You see that? Let me just bring that in a bit closer. So corner to corner, like that, and then I'm going to stitch from that corner across to that corner, so that then when I fold that out, I've got my corner and I can trim that bit off. Let me just do that, and I'll bring it back over and show you how that works. Okay, so I've stitched that from corner to corner. So what I need now is just to trim that extra off. So it's about 1/4 of an inch seam. You don't have to be absolutely accurate here. And then I turn that back, and then I can press that down. And now my strip is a continuous strip. Got one more, got the other one. I did the same. I'll show you. So, whoops, sorry, you've got the iron. Just put that over there. And then same with the second join. Trim the extra off. You do end up with an awful lot of fabric, so it takes a bit of fiddling with, but there we go. And then just press that one down as well. And now I have one long strip. So what I need now, the next thing I need to do is to take this strip and I'm going to fold it in half all the way down and press it. And then once I've got that, that becomes my binding, and I sew that binding to the outside. Sorry, just get the iron out of the way. That binding to the outside edge, and then that will turn over and make my binding. But I'll show you how I do that when I get there. I'll just press this and then I'll just show you how I start to attach it to the table runner. Okay. All right. So I now have my strip in. Can you see that? That's been folded in half and pressed all the way along. And I'm now going to start attaching it by sewing it with the machine all around the rough edge against rough edge with a 1/4 inch seam. But you need to leave a piece at the beginning so that when you come all the way around you can join it together, and I'll show you how to do that when I get there. But for the moment I'm going to start here, having left that piece. Usually I leave quite a long piece because it's easier then to work with when I get round. So I don't know how long that is. Hang on, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. That's about a 10-inch lead in. And then I'll start machine stitching from here. When I get to the corners, because I don't think you'll be able to see this on the machine if I take it to the machine and show you. When I get to the corner, stitch to that corner there, and then you stop stitching, you fold it. Sorry, let's see if I can get it close enough so you can see. Stitch it to there. Sorry, my heater's just come on. That's the noise in the background. It's a bit cold out here today. You fold it back like that on itself. Can you see that? And then you pull it back down square again to stitch it down. And then that will turn out to make a nice corner. So just see if I can bring that up close enough to the camera. Can you see that? So down like that, across to there, and then on down there. So I'm going to get on and stitch the binding on, and then I'll just show you how I finish off the binding. And then the final bit is hand stitching, which I'll probably end up sitting and doing in the warm indoors. But I'll get that stitched on and then I'll show you the next bit. We're nearly there. Okay, so the binding is stitched on all the way around. And now I've got these two pieces and I've cut it so they overlap by 2.5 inches, which is the width of the piece of binding that I'm using. So that material, when it's opened out, oh, I get it, that's 2.5. It's 2.5 centimeters wide. So we've got an overlap of 2.5 centimeters so that we can join the two together. So we open that one up flat like that. And we take this one and we lay that up like we did before to join the pieces of fabric together. And then I will stitch the diagonal across here again. So when that folds out, we've got one continuous piece of fabric. So that's the trick, is 2.5 inch overlap. All right, so that's from that end. That is now 2.5 inches over there, so that when I join, it creates the square and fits the runner. So I'm just going to go and stitch that, and then I'll show you how it looks. So there we go, stitch that across so that when we fold that back, that will join together, open it out, and it will perfectly fit to finish off the border. So I'm just going to cut off the excess like I did before. Scissors. Cut off that excess. Fold it out. And now I'm just going to go over to the machine and stitch that last piece along there. And then I'll talk to you about how to finish off the binding. We are so close to finishing. Oh, I'm sorry about the noise, but it's absolutely tipping it down out there, and so that means it's you can hear it on the cabin roof. I'm actually going to go indoors and do the rest of this in a minute, so I'll be grateful to get indoors, I think. So what we need to do now is we fold that out, fold it over so it covers the seam like that. Sorry, like that. And then I have these wonderful clips to just hold it. Do the next bit. And I'm going to go all the way around. When I get to the corner, you can see because I did that stitch that folds, it just turns over at the corner really easily. And so you can just make a nice neat corner on there. So I'm going to go all the way around, clipping those down, and then it's just a case of slip stitching all the way along the back to hold that down, and then our table runner will be complete. So I am going to take my thread and my needle, and I'm going to go and sit in the warm of my lounge and have a quiet bit of time just slowly enjoying stitching this down. And actually that's one of my favourite bits, is getting this stitched down. So that's one of my favourite bits. One of the lovely things about quilting is that you can just get lost in it. And I love being able to come out to the cabin where I have my own space for that. And this last bit of hand stitching is just such a lovely, gentle way of finishing off and knowing that you've completed the work. So once I have stitched it all down, I'll give it a good press, and then I'll show you the finished table runner. And I'll just quickly talk you through how I'm going to make the placemats to go with it, okay, which is very simple because it's exactly the same thing really, but I'll just show you that. Right, so now I have completed the table runner. I'll show you it on the table, and I'm part way through doing a placemat, so I'll show you how I've done that, and then we'll be done. I'm sorry, I know this is quite a long video, but to do all the processes, it takes quite a bit of time. But what we will do is we'll try and put chapters on it. Hopefully we've put chapters on it, and that has helped you find your way through it. But anyway, so the table runner is on the table. I just lift it up, you can see it completed. All right. So I'll put that on the table, and then in a minute I'll show you it all on the table. But this is now one of the placemats. I haven't yet quilted it. I haven't done the sandwich and quilted, but this is the patchwork all finished. So as you can see, I've used the same panel in the middle. I've added a couple of strips of a contrasting fabric so that it's wide enough. And then I've put the same board around it, and I will quilt it exactly the same way as I have the table runner. And the reason for that size is I actually got out my plates that I used for Christmas, and I wanted to make sure that would fit and that the knives and forks and everything could all go on the placemat, so my table is protected. So that's what I did. I brought in the patch, put down that, and then worked out what size I needed and created the placemat from that. So there we go. I'll give you a view above in a minute so you can see it all. But that is nearly done. I've just got the rest. I've got the placemats to sandwich and quilt, and then I'll be ready for Christmas Day for the family to come along. And I'll try and get a picture of the table when it's all laid up properly. Thank you for sticking with me through this video if you have, and I hope you've enjoyed it. It was a long project, and maybe I'll try and do a shorter project after Christmas to share with you a bit more of patchwork and quilting and working with fabrics. But I hope you've enjoyed watching it. I hope it's inspired you. And if you do want to follow along, don't forget, hit that subscribe button, give me a like, help it so that other people can find it as well. And I'll be back before too long with the last of the Christmas baking, I think. Only a little while to go now, we're nearly there. Thank you, and see you again soon. Bye.